Yeah, thank you, Paul, for introduction and also for inviting and having us here on the panel today. Welcome, everybody. We're doing this panel a bit different than the other ones because we have a bit of a teaser before we start really with the discussion. So, the title of the panel is Accelerating Change in the Global Chemical Industry. And of course, it's a bit of a home run, but why do we sort of need to change and accelerate change? This is a graph which comes from the Climate Target Initiatives, and it basically, they are tracking what policies have basically been launched, and they are comparing it to what is actually needed under the Paris Agreement to sort of run towards the 1.5 degree maximum temperature increase. And you can see with the red circle by 2030, there's a significant gap of what we will be emitting and what we should only be emitting. So from that graph, you can see definitely a need to accelerate. The next graph also shows this because there's more than just climate change. There is a graph which is by the Stockholm Resilience Center, and they are monitoring 9 different dimensions. So it's not just climate change, it's also like land use changes, fresh water consumption and all this. And 6 out of 9 dimensions are in critical territory. So that means it's a much broader topic. And of course, it's not just the chemical industry. It's basically society and all industries. But the chemical industry is such a pronounced industry that we need to address this and accelerate change. And that's why I'm happy that I'm having such a pronounced and prominent group here today. So I'm welcoming Samir Somaiya from the Somaiya group. There's Arnaud Gabenisch from Solvay, and there's Dolman from Holiferm. So please welcome them this afternoon. And before we dive into the discussion, maybe 2-3 sentences, introducing yourself and your group.
Thank you. Samir Somaiya here. I'm privileged to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, Paul. I'm the chairman and managing director of Godavari Biorefineries. We are an integrated biorefinery using sugarcane as a feedstock, converting it into sugar, bioelectricity, ethanol, and a whole host of chemicals. That's what we do.
Arnaud?
So Arnaud Gabenisch. So I'm in charge of the open innovation. So the external partnerships of a growth platform dedicated to renewable materials and biotech. That's a new tool within Solvay. So Solvay is a large company, an old one, I would say, so not always so easy to make change. And so this growth platform has to, the objective of the growth platform is really to accelerate sustainability across the group.
And last but not least, Ben.
Yeah, again, thanks for organising. Yeah, really happy to be here. So I'm Ben Dolman, CEO of Holiferm. We produce surfactants by fermentation. Our differentiation is that we use integrated production separation for semi-continuous production, which means we can produce at a larger scale and for a lower cost than some others can.
Mm-hmm. Great to have you here this afternoon. Thank you. So I come from Helm, as mentioned by Paul. Helm is a company 123 years old, so that's why I would like to ask first Arnaud, because Solvay is 160 years old, so yeah, long tradition, big global company, and I know this from my company, and like say traditional companies to sort of drive change, to accelerate is a bit of a difficult topic. So what is your experience in the Solvay organization? How have you overcome this? Is there maybe even a recommendation which you could share with the audience?
Yeah, and I'm coming from SMEs and startups. So when I joined Solvay in 2018, I saw the potential of such a company, but also the difficult thing. So Solvay, that's 13 billion, 22,000 employees, that's 61 countries and 100 industrial sites. So it's a very large company. And even if innovation has always been part of our DNA, it's difficult to change. What we did is that we identified that for all the growth businesses, sustainability was a major mega trend. And that we had to accelerate that at the group level. And to do so, we created growth platforms. And so that's a new mindset. So in addition to businesses, that's entrepreneurship model in terms of, I would say, spirit and mindset. And we have one in battery, one in green hydrogen, one in thermoplastic composite, and the latest one, the newest one, renewable materials and biotech. And so all this growth platform has to accelerate, I would say, sustainability, and they also have to commit in terms of new sales. And typically, my growth platform has to commit in terms of new sales, generating $500 million in terms of new sales, totally new sales by 2030. So it's a very good way, I would say, to accelerate. And finally, my advice would be to accelerate open innovation, because it forces you to commit, to make choices, and also to do so with external players, external partners. And so that's a major part of my job.
Well, I mean, $500 million by 2030, and Solvay being a stock market listed company, I mean, that's a promise which you have to deliver, right? Otherwise, you will be in trouble. So that must be sort of really some driving force in the organization then.
Exactly. The global objective we have is to double our circular sales by 2030.
Wow, impressive.
So it's really it's a step change. It's really tough. But again, it forces ourselves to be very clear on where we want to focus our priorities in terms of application, in terms of businesses, and how to do so in terms of technologies and also in terms of end of life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Maybe Ben, over to you, because you are the youngest one here in the group in terms of your corporation. You started 2018, I believe, so you have just entered the phase of commercialization. So from that perspective, acceleration should be really at the heart of your company. It's like your DNA. So how do you handle that? And is there anything from your perspective where you say, look, that's really what the chemical industry could learn from you to sort of drive change in their acting and doings?
So I think there's some things that we can do as a small company that probably can't be done in a big company, which means you can go quickly. So some examples, we've been able to buy repurchased equipment very quickly, even buy on the same day that we found it. Uh-huh. We can sometimes commit to doing something before we, for instance, have done all of the design work, and those kind of things enable you to go very quickly. What we also see is very important for companies like us, small companies that have that agility. You need to have strong partners. So, for instance, we've got market partners that enable us to get those kind of market commitments, that also give the comfort from some of the big companies that are used to working with some of the other big companies, that comfort of being able to work with the suppliers that they're used to dealing with. And we see really it's very important that the companies like ours that can move quickly and do things quickly, work with the big companies like the others in the panel, to be able to provide that kind of scale and the kind of capital to be able to get to kind of mass global scale.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds a bit like what you're doing, Arnaud, right? Because from what you described, you also sort of broke it down into smaller units, is it?
Yeah, and we also are collaborating with a lot of startups, and typically in open innovation, I'm responsible also of the deal flow. I'm managing that with the corporate venturing fund. So yeah, that's typically the kind of things we have to do. We have to collaborate globally, I would say, with technology providers, but also suppliers and different, and also accessing to, I would say, competitive feedstock, etc. So collaboration is key in this journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Samir, I'm not forgetting you.
No, I'm quite happy if you.
So you are running a business with sustainable products based on sugarcane, and you have been doing this for decades.
That's
that means
right.
You have been doing it when sustainability was not the buzzword that we're having today, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean that you have already exhausted your potential? Or is this actually that because you have created this long-term base, that you're even better positioned to accelerate on that basis and drive innovation even better forward?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I still remember when I returned to India and we were doing this, and people all advised us to ditch this green bus. It's the time of oil, not the time of green. And we strongly felt that it was a good bus to be on, even if it moves, as we would say in India, in a bullock cart speed, but it would move forward. That was the way we would think about it. So, going from 90% sugar in our revenues to today, when sugar is less than 30% of our revenues, when sugarcane is still our primary feedstock. And we have 40% as energy and 30% as chemicals and 30% sugar. So 70% we moved to non. And today, and we've done this in spite of that kind of environment that was a difficult one, an oil economy. And now we suddenly find an economy, a world driven by planetary compulsions and on a wide set of dimensions, as you just spoke about. And we also see that a lot of our customers, whether it's a B2B customer or the final end user, which is demanding of the companies that they become more sustainable in their view. So I think for us, the world is beginning now. So, we like in that bullock cart, we put a rocket engine now. So we like to see ourselves moving together in that speed, a world which is sustainable. And we are looking at the future with a whole host of what I would look at sucrose, carbon chemistry actually. So whether it is sucrose chemistry, whether it's ethanol-based chemistry, whether it is cellulose-based chemistry, cellulose based on lignin, hemicellulose or cellulose, and also looking at the world of regenerative agriculture, because we think that's also the best. You need, we looked at it from soil health point of view, you need stronger soil health. The implications of using up all the carbon which is in the soil is going to be disastrous for our food and fuel and energy, and so we're looking at it as an integrative way in how we innovate to meet the needs. Yeah, so exciting times.
Yeah, that was something which was mentioned also just before lunch in the shoe panel discussion, this regenerative farming. So I mean, it's of course good and right to sort of talk about bio-based products, but if they are sort of done at the expense of exhausting soil, then of course that cannot be a solution, right? So are you working together with farmers to ensure this, or what are you doing there?
So for the last, if you look at the carbon we've used up, we started with soil, then with forest, then coal, then oil, then gas. So we need to restart regenerating. We've, for the last 5 years, so we've never looked upon it in this sort of bird's eye view. We've looked upon it from a very earthy soil way, when you suddenly look at the yields falling and seeing what needs to be done, and looked at some traditional agroecological practices. We learned from the farmers. We are not, and we suddenly saw some practices that they were doing using traditional methods in India. They were using things such as dung, urine, even yogurt. They put yogurt in and so trying to figure out. And then I had a professor from Cornell University who told me that that's actually putting probiotics in the farm. And then for 5 years we researched the effect of that on the soil, and we actually found very good results. And so now we're working with many thousand farmers trying to propagate that.
Right. That's what you mentioned, Ben, collaboration, right? So collaboration in a different dimension even, right? So maybe swinging to another point, I think to sort of drive innovation forward, there's 4 dimensions: technology, financing, market access, regulatory. So I would like to sort of explore this a bit with you. Maybe swinging to you, Ben, because as a startup, commercializing, financing is quite essential. So anything which you sort of can state in terms of acceleration, access to funding, what needs to be done in that field to sort of make sure that this can still happen? We had also this morning the financial guys here sitting on the panel and discussing this. So anything from your perspective there?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, we've been so far VC-backed, and that I think makes sense. Up until our stage, it was a relatively high risk and de-risking the technology. As you kind of make the next steps, it's obviously important to have some of the infrastructure type funds available to be able to build the big plants. You're not going to be able to build hundreds of kilotons of capacity off of venture funds. So important to have some of that funding, and some of that funding is available. But I think that's something that can also be done at a regional level. Support some of those kind of funding to build build bioeconomy in big capacity plants.
Okay, great. Yeah. But another dimension, Arnaud, is that we need to sort of convince the end consumer to sort of appreciate these innovations, which come typically at a higher price. We had that discussion this morning here as well. What do you think from a Solvay perspective? What should be done in order to sort of have an acceleration in that dimension with changing the mindset with the end consumer?
Honestly, my feeling is that you do not need any more to increase the awareness, because each end customer wants sustainability, naturality, etc. And so I can take many examples, but if I take ingredient formulation, for instance, all has to be biodegradable by 2030. So you do not have to convince anybody, but you have to bring solutions. And that's exactly the point, is what kind of solution? What is the best solution? Mixing the right feedstock, and we will have a lot of different pressure to secure feedstocks, whatever they are, waste, CO2, etc. The right technology and the end of life. And again, growth platforms are dedicated to that. And I think that the answer is also to work globally and trying to reinvent value chains. And from the chemical perspective, that's probably the most important challenge, is to reinvent circular ecosystems, to reinvent value chains from the feedstock to the end of life. But customer, they all want natural, they all want biodegradability, etc., and they are more aware with the time. So we have to bring solutions and to make them competitive. And that's not so easy. And also to bring something significant from, I would say, the footprint. The footprint has to be better. And my surprise when I joined Solvay is the fact that the chemical industry is very good already. So compete with the chemical industry and be better in terms of LCA, typically, that's not so easy. And even if you are renewable with the right, with the new technology, is absolutely not so easy. And that's exactly what we can bring, trying to, since the inception of a project, elaborate a sort of first or preliminary LCA and have some order of magnitude of what is important to be improved.
Yeah, that's, I think, an interesting point, the efficiency of the chemical industry, which no doubt is there, and trading that off against reduced product carbon footprint, which bioproducts typically bring. So that's maybe an interesting point to discuss over coffee, but we're not there yet, right? So, Samir, the last thing there, the regulatory frame, right? From your perspective, how important is that to sort of have an acceleration in the chemical industry? Or is it actually the contrary, that regulatory frame would limit innovative power and just create a too narrow focus? Any thoughts on that one?
I think you can go and argue both sides on that one, but I would like to fall on the side that regulation helps accelerate the development towards a particular goal. Now, you may say later you could improve upon that goal. I'll give an example. So India was running at about 3% blending on gasoline or petrol for ethanol. And they set an ambitious target of 20% blending by 2025. This is an economy that's growing quite rapidly. And we hit 10% last year, and we're on track to hit 20% in 2 more years. Okay. So that's without a regulatory push and a regulatory enabling of being able to blend. Separately, working with the car companies. So the car companies have also assured that from April 24, all new cars in India will be flex fuel cars. So I think this would not have happened without a regulatory push. Similarly, right now, the government of India is pushing for renewable natural gas coming from, again, biofeedstock to meet energy security. So I think that's very much happening. Sometimes what it does is, for the better use of carbon to make biomaterials, it may divert certain carbon feedstock into, say, burning rather than that. But I think on the overall planetary perspective, when you look at trying to use biogenic carbon, it leads to better outcomes. And then for people like us who also want to innovate beyond carbon as a material, beyond energy, or in addition to energy, it just raises the bar to be more challenging and to create greater value in that carbon value creation.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. As a moderator, I also have to watch the time a bit. Right. So, and as we had discussed before, we have questions endlessly, and I think it's fantastic that we're having you here to really share your life experience and bring that to the audience. But we have also a gift for the audience. And again, this is a bit special compared to the other ones. So each of the three panelists have basically a key statement which they would like you to take away. And maybe, again, that is something which stimulates a bit of a discussion over the coffee break. So Arnaud, the first one is from you here. You want to illustrate that to the audience and explain to us why you think this is a key statement to take away?
Yeah, I can bring my testimony because when we created this growth platform, I was working on the prefiguration of that. But so we define a mission, and the mission is really addressing a very important objective and focus. Is to convert a renewable, I would say, feedstock in sustainable solutions. And there is a very important difference for us between renewability and sustainability. What is renewable is not necessarily sustainable. So the key objectives are the sustainability. And next, we define how to organize ourselves. And so we are working on bringing more biogenic carbon through different sources, waste, etc., trying not to be in competition with food, obviously, trying to be ethical, etc. We are bringing more biotech. Solvay is not a biological company, and we fixed objectives to that, and we are working on the end of life, which is absolutely key. And just to finish on that, for the implementation, we commit ourselves to generate $500 million by 2030. So in less than 10 years, our commitment is to bring $500 million of new sales, beside accelerating all the businesses. Mm-hmm. And it's lots of pressure, but very recently we signed a very nice agreement with Ginkgo, which is the leader. We acquired a lab in Boston in synthetic biology that's completely new for the group. And you cannot imagine the impact for our customers, for our partners, suppliers, and also internally. Everyone wants to be part of that. What's the next in terms of molecules? Can I contribute? Are you ready to elaborate new products, new business model, etc.? So yeah, the impact is just huge.
Yeah, I like it because accelerating and implementation go hand in hand here. Ben, that's your statement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the things I kind of wanted to address was the magnitude of what is required from the industry, and I think you see kind of some of the statements from some of the big FMCG companies like Unilever that they want to go 100% bio-based by 2030. You see the kind of graphs that you shared with us at the start, and the kind of magnitude of carbon reduction required. And I think one of the points that I kind of wanted to make was that we need to start thinking of how do we scale by multiples of volume per year rather than scale by percentage points. So I think that's something that Holiferm we're really looking to do. We're looking to scale more than 3 times our capacity every year. And then in terms of how we do that, I think that really collaboration is the key. The challenge, and alongside the challenge, the opportunity is big enough that there's room for many players, and there's a requirement that we all work together and kind of, I think, re-envision a little bit how the chemical industry collaborates to build the whole supply chain to be able to get to the kind of objectives that we as a society need the chemical industry to achieve.
Yeah. I like it because it's really ambitious, right? And last but not least, Samir.
I have to see exactly what I said because I said so. Yes. You know, the whole point that I was trying to make was we look at it at an overall look at carbon, and look at it also from, as I said earlier, you want to regenerate the carbon which is there in the soil. We must have the carbon source available to us. And so one is when we say bio, we are taking renewable feedstock, we also need to know how we make that feedstock. So that itself, I think, is often forgotten. It's often under the radar. So I think that needs to come above the radar. It has to be within our sights, because that is the richest way in which, if you build soil organic carbon, you combat climate change. The next is how you take that carbon feedstock and process it in a green manner, and then convert it into biomaterials. Of course, energy, but also biomaterials, because biomaterials will also have a longer span of sequestering carbon over a particular life cycle. And if it is biodegradable, then it becomes circular. So I think we need to look at it holistically and then work with society, whether it is the farmers, the consumers, and whole society, so that we all learn to live sustainably together.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thanks for that. So we only have 30 seconds left. Paul, you give us 5 more minutes?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, then we can really sort of relax back. No, so yeah, but that was basically then for us the point to sort of hand this over to you, to the audience, and to sort of hear whether you have comments to what we have made here as statements or whether you have questions. So, and Paul has been so gracious to give us an additional 5 minutes. So please come forward. Thomas? Yeah? There's a mic coming.
Hello, my name is I'm following you guys at 4:30. Talk a little bit about end consumers. One question to Arnaud. You said nothing more is needed, and all the consumers are ready to spend their money on sustainable solutions. If we look at the inflation in the last 2 years, we have an industry like biofood, which for the first time since 15 years declined. In Germany, some biofood retailers went into insolvency. So my perspective is a little bit different. If there is a quench on other costs like energy and so on, the spend is not so much there. So we see a discrepancy in what people say in market research, what they would like to buy and what they really then buy at the cashier. What's your take on that? I would be interested to hear.
But it's obviously a complex question. You know, 15 years ago, I was working as a consultant on bio-based, and when I was asking about, but what is the premium for that, it was 0. So anybody was answering, okay, you will be able to have a premium, 10, 20%, etc. I'm not sure that it's really something that has changed at the end. And so price is obviously absolutely key. And I would say that it's a main challenge, indeed. We can have a premium for some new, I would say, bio product, but you cannot start from the idea that you can double the price. It's not true. It's not true. It will be the same, or maybe with a premium or a limited one, but for every product you will have to be competitive. And that's exactly the reason why we are always, and that's what we can bring in terms of chemical group, because we know the application in terms of specifications, but we know also the price. And so since the very first steps of a project, we are able to say, okay, the price is this one. End of story. And we'll have to be competitive and to bring a footprint. So the equation is very, very hard. I agree. And when I said that it was not exactly a question of awareness, it's also because of the regulation and so on. If I take formulation ingredients, typically, they will all have to be 100% by 2030. L'Oréal was this afternoon speaking, but it's exactly the objective they have. And so that's already something ongoing. And so we will have to change. And if I would be a little bit more provocative for a group like Solvay, if we are not able to do it, we will disappear in terms of industry, and we will disappear in terms of businesses. Because at the end, if we are not biodegradable for that kind of businesses, we will disappear. And so we have to do it. So I agree, it's a complex question, but since the inception, we have to integrate the question of price. And not saying, okay, because we will be the first to propose such bio solution, we will be able to double the price. It's not right, it's not true.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Can I speak loud?
No, then the rest of the audience in the back will probably not hear it. So the mic is coming.
A question on regulation. Regulation has driven the massive use of bioethanol or ethanol from from renewable carbon sources. That same amount is probably the entire feedstock that the chemicals industry globally uses. Would it not be much better to mandate the use of, let's say, sugar or sugar-based products as a feedstock for the chemicals industry, just like the fuels industry has been mandated? And at the same time, is it actually not a very bad idea to subsidize ethanol for fuels and burn it, when the same ethanol could be used as a feedstock for chemicals.
I agree.
So, I wear both hats. I put ethanol into the fuel market, and I use ethanol to make chemicals. So for me, it's a very relevant question. I think from a regulation standpoint, it's much easier to mandate one sink for a carbon product. In India, it is a food and fuel, not a food versus fuel. There is a surplus of certain kinds of foods, and the farmers are small. So you have to ensure that they have income security, and by having a dual market output, whether it goes into foods or ultimately to fuels, it assures income security to the farmer and therefore production. So it's easier from a regulatory standpoint to say any surplus should go into energy. Mandating it into chemical feedstock would be difficult, because which chemical product would you mandate it for? And is it always going to be, because I make so many chemical products, it's not very clear which ones are remunerative. Today, with the oil prices where they are, oil to ethanol for fuel makes sense. Carbon for chemicals depends on which chemicals you choose. From a regulatory standpoint, if you leave it to a particular government system to decide which chemical works, which doesn't work, I think you'll end up with a mess. I think that's where you want innovation to step in, and you want to be able to find chemistry that can bear the cost of the ethanol going into fuels. You take that as a base. Now that makes the difficulty, as you can. But if you can really innovate, use that carbon, use that ethanol, and try to make chemicals. And that's what we are doing. And it is always a challenge, but it is something that we're doing successfully.
So time is up. Thanks for your questions. And if there's more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the panelists over the coffee break, which we are now having. So thanks a lot for the three of you too.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure.